Hi readers, Chris here. Today I'm going to be going over my January wrap-up, and then at the very end I'm going to do my February TBR. January was an interesting reading month. I've only done a few reviews so far. I know I'm super behind on reviews, but I feel like for the most part, except for maybe one book, every book that I read, there was something I really liked about it and something that I didn't like about it. So when it comes time to trying to actually rank these books in any sort of order, super difficult. I had to make lists and write down what I liked, what I didn't like, added them up, see which one had a bigger ratio of dislike to like. It was a whole thing. So I did the best I could, and I'm going to start with my least favorite book of the month, which is a book I still liked, and that's going to be Among the Beasts and Briars by Ashley Poston. This is a book box book that I think this is actually the first book that I ever got in a book box. It came in a Spiritcraft book box way back in the beginning of 2021. This book starts out super cute. It's a YA fantasy about a young girl. She's a gardener's daughter, and her village is kind of surrounded by this wood, but no one ever goes into the woods because they're cursed. Curse takes over. Only the gardener's daughter can save the day. Super simple story, super cute, and there's a fox in it, a talking fox, and you know I love me my animals. So why is this book at the bottom of my list? That is because this book has one of the absolute worst endings I've ever read in my entire life. I'm gonna talk about this more when I do my actual review, but here's just a little sneak preview. This ending is horrible. It's one of those endings that like the story is going along and then it just ends, and then all of a sudden the next chapter is like 6 months later and you're like, wait a minute, what happened? I don't know. It left so many things unanswered. It's like literally the story just ended and then picked up like a few months later and everything has changed and things are different. Super weird, very jarring, did not like it at all. So that's why this one is on the bottom of my list. I still liked it for the most part. That ending though, whew. Next up is going to be Cruel Crown by Victoria Aveyard. Cruel Crown is a series of novellas. There are 2 novellas in here, which are Queen Song and Steel Scars. So I already did my 1-minute review on this short book, and if you didn't see that, Queen Song, really liked that one. That was a great story. Steel Scars, not so much. I believe Mary and Joe over at Book Buds, you said the same exact thing about this book, that the one was pretty good and the other one was kind of pointless. So I agree with you, feel the same way. But again, because Queen Song was really good, that's why I put it just slightly above Among the Beasts and Briars, but they could have gone either way. Next up on my list for January is going to be Stephen King's The Drawing of the Three. This is the second book in the Dark King series. The second book in the Dark Tower series. And it's funny because I have read the Dark Tower series before, but it was a long time ago when I read it. So this is technically a reread. I didn't really remember much about it, but there's not really much in here that needs to be remembered. I mean, this book is basically all character building and like no plot whatsoever. Now, don't get me wrong, like there is a plot in here. Like the plot is Roland meeting these characters. That is the plot. It has nothing to do with Roland's quest for the Dark Tower. Like it is a book that is totally character building, no plot whatsoever. So I like it but only to a point. It doesn't have anything egregiously bad like the 2 previous books, so that's why it's a little bit higher, but there's also nothing like super exciting about it either. And I had forgotten how weird the Dark Tower series is, and this book isn't even that weird. Like I know it gets a lot weirder as it goes on, but even this one is a little weird, and I'm like, oh man, maybe I'm not gonna like this as much as I did the first time going through. Time will tell. Next up is my historical fiction for the month, and that was The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. Kristen Hanna, I just discovered her last year when I read The Nightingale, so I was really excited when I found this book bargain book shopping. And The Great Alone is basically, it's about this family in the 70s. There's a husband, wife, and daughter. The husband was in the Vietnam War. Ever since he came back, he hasn't been the same. He has PTSD. They're having a hard time like putting down roots anywhere. He can't keep a job. They end up going to Alaska, and unfortunately, there's a lot of abuse that happens. And again, there's nothing egregiously bad about this book at all. The writing in this book is amazing. The writing is brilliant. The writing makes you want to keep turning the page and not stop reading this story. But the story itself is super depressing. It is super depressing. It is so sad what this young girl goes through, both with her parents, watching her parents struggle in this super toxic relationship, watching her fall in love, watching her heart be broken. Like, it's not a fun story to read. So yes, it is written absolutely beautiful. It is a beautiful, but it's not a book that I would recommend unless you're someone who likes to read depressing stuff. So if you want to be depressed, The Great Alone is a great book. So that is why I kind of put it in the middle of the pack here. Now we're getting up into the top 3 of the month of January. So this one should be no surprise, and that is A Living Nightmare, the first book in the Cirque du Freak series by Darren Shan. As a reminder, this book was recommended to me by Mason in the Dark. Mason, thank you again for recommending this to me. Again, put this way higher on my list because it's a great book. It's super fun, it's super engaging, it's super creepy. The only thing that I would say is that the characters do make aggravating decisions at times, but it is kind of on purpose. So again, that is why this book is much higher on my list. There's nothing like mind-blowing or mind-shattering about it, which is why it's not like number 1 or number 2, but it's still a super, super, super good book, super solid read, and definitely one of the highlights of January. Now comes my number 2 book, and I had a really, really hard time figuring out where to rank this book. I'm going to have to do a full-length review on this one and talk more about it because that's going to be House of Earth and Blood, the first Crescent City book by Sarah J. Maas. I don't think I've ever read a book that has elicited such strong emotions as this book does. This book made me angry, it made me annoyed, it made me want to stop reading it, but it also made me cry, it made my heart break, it made me smile and laugh and cheer and joy, it made me roll my eyes. This book was a total roller coaster of emotions, There is some stuff in this book that I absolutely hate, which I will talk about later on. But there are other parts of this book that I really, really, really love, like really love. So I had a very hard time trying to decide where I wanted to put this one and if the good outweighed the bad. Obviously, I put it at number 2 because at the end of the day, there's enough that I like about it that I am going to go get the sequel when it comes out on the 15th, but definitely have a lot to say about this book. I want to complain about it and praise it at the same time, so more to come on this book, hopefully sometime this week. And last but not least, the only book I haven't talked about so far, which is going to be The Lightning Thief, the first book in the Percy Jackson series. I already did a whole review about this. I will post it up above or link it down below. This is the most fun, most well-rounded book that I read this month. And again, there's nothing egregiously wrong with it. My only little teeny tiny complaint is that there was so much mythology, like there wasn't a lot of time to let some of it sink in. But that's like a super, super, super minor complaint into what otherwise is pretty much a perfect story. So definitely my favorite read of January. Hopefully the other books are just as good. Those are all the books I read in January, so now I'm gonna quickly go through all the books that I'm going to be reading in February, starting with my recommendation for this month, and that is going to be Searcher by Nicole Bates. Some of you may remember Nicole Bates is an author that I am friends with over on Bookstagram, and she was kind enough to share a book with me last year that she had wrote called Gutted. Now this is her new book, and I actually beta read for this book back over the summer. So I have already read the unpublished version of this book a few times. I'm really excited to see what she has changed. So Searcher is a new book from her. Like I said, it's kind of a sci-fi / fantasy book. I will definitely be talking more about this once I finish reading it. Next up, I am continuing my Stephen King journey with my Stephen King book of the month, Misery. Misery, I have already read more than once. I've read it a bunch of times, but because it's on my list, I have to read it again. And I am doing a buddy read with Misery with one of my friends, Athina Leon, over on Instagram. I'll link her handle down below if anyone wants to check out her page. And Athina, if you're watching, I can't wait to continue talking about Misery with you. For my adult fantasy book this month, I'm kind of doing a 2-in-1. Because, like I mentioned, I do want to read the second Crescent City book when it comes out on February 15th, House of Sky and Breath. So I was kind of debating whether or not I just wanted to not put anything in this slot until then, because 15 days isn't a whole lot of time for me. But I found a book that I could slot in there, which is going to be a Wizard of Earthsea. So this is the first book in the Earthsea series, and it's a super quick book. It's only 15 chapters, so if I read one chapter a day, that'll take me up until the 15th, so I can finish it before House of Sky and Breath comes out. Next up, my historical fiction for the month of February is going to be Sister in Arms by Kaya Alderson, an author I have never read before, but one of my friends over on Instagram at Kristen's Reading Nook, she recently read this book not that long ago. She wrote a review about it, and she had gotten an extra copy, and I reached out to her and I said, wow, this book sounds super, super cute, and she was kind enough to just send me a copy. I mean, super, super, super kind. So of course I had to read it for Black History Month. I'm also saying, Galentine's Day. It's about two Black women who joined the army in World War II. Really, really cool. Definitely something I did not know had happened at all. So I can't wait to read this one and talk more about it. For my YA fantasy for February, yeah, that came out right. I'm continuing the Red Queen series with King's Cage. Yes, I found this at a library sale, so I don't have a cover, but this is King's Cage. This is the third book in the Red Queen series. I've heard that it gets better now in the third book, so I'm hoping that's the case, although I am like 10 chapters in so far and not much has happened, but I'm still holding out hope that this series turns around. I really enjoyed book 1. Book 2, not so much. And then Cruel Crown, one of the stories I liked, one of them I didn't. This series has been hit or miss, but I'm still holding out hope that it turns around because I really want to finish it out and hopefully it ends on a strong note. Next up, of course, I'm continuing the Percy Jackson series with Sea of Monsters. We'll see if this one lives up to the brilliance that was book 1. More to come on that one, for sure. And last but not least, my BookBok books for the month is going to be Beautiful Wild by Anna Gaberson. This is a YA romance, which I don't read a ton of romance. A lot of the fantasy that I read has romance in it because a lot of YA fantasy has romance, but I usually don't just read like straight romance. So I've heard some mixed reviews about this one, so we'll see what happens. I guess that's really all I can say about it for now, and more to come. That is all for today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel. Jack, Meepers, Snowball, and I would very much appreciate your support. All right, everyone, happy reading. Can you say bye, old lady Snowball? Huh? Can you say goodbye? No? Okay. Happy reading, everyone.